The notification arrived less than 3 minutes after I watched my husband disappear through the departure gates at JFK. $15,000 charged at an exclusive diamond boutique on Fifth Avenue. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. David was supposed to be boarding a flight to Tokyo for a 4-year overseas assignment. So why was his credit card being used in the heart of Manhattan? In that instant, every uneasy feeling I'd ignored over the past 24 hours came crashing back. Only hours earlier, I had hugged my husband goodbye. I had even cried a little, believing we were making a painful sacrifice for our future together. He promised that the promotion waiting for him in Japan would change our lives forever. We talked about buying a larger home, starting a family, and finally enjoying the financial security we had spent 7 years building. I believed every word. I had no idea I was helping him disappear into another woman's arms. The night before his departure, our apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side had been unusually lively. Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows while David welcomed his parents, Richard and Teresa, who had driven from their quiet Pennsylvania town carrying homemade jam, fresh eggs, and enough country charm to make the evening look like the perfect family reunion. Yet something felt wrong. David laughed louder than usual. His smile never faded, but it never reached his eyes. Every few minutes he glanced at his phone before slipping it back into his pocket. Dinner was my responsibility, as always. I had rushed home from work to prepare his favorite meal along with dishes his parents loved. Everything looked warm and peaceful on the surface. Then David cleared his throat. "I have some incredible news." His parents immediately stopped eating. "The company selected me to lead an international assignment in Tokyo. I'll spend 4 years helping launch a new division there. When I return, I'll be promoted to vice president." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. 4 years? That wasn't a business trip. It was practically another lifetime. I looked directly at him. "When were you planning to tell me?" He reached for my hand so quickly it almost seemed rehearsed. "It all happened at the last minute," he said softly. "The CEO needed an answer immediately. I accepted because this is our future, Ellie. Everything I'm doing is for us." His words sounded convincing. His eyes didn't. Before I could ask another question, Teresa burst into happy tears. "Our son is going to Japan," she cried proudly. "What an honor. You've made this family proud." Richard raised his wineglass. "Don't worry about us," he told David. "Your wife will take care of everything while you're gone." I expected David to laugh it off. Instead, he nodded. "I've actually already thought about that." A chill crawled down my spine. "My parents will stay here with you during the assignment," he continued. "You'll have company, and I'll know they're being cared for. It gives me peace of mind." He wasn't asking. He had already decided. I forced myself to stay calm. "David, 4 years is a long time. We should discuss this first." Before he answered, Teresa slammed her hand onto the table. "So we're a burden now?" The accusation landed exactly where David wanted it to. He gently squeezed my fingers. "Please, Eleanor. Help me. I can't focus overseas if I'm worried about my parents." 3 pairs of eyes waited for my answer. Saying no would make me the selfish wife. So I smiled, even though every instinct inside me screamed not to. "All right," I whispered. "They can stay." Relief flashed across David's face for only a second before he buried it beneath another perfect smile. That should have been the moment I realized my husband wasn't asking for support. He was arranging the pieces of a carefully planned escape. The next morning, I drove him to JFK, watched him disappear through the terminal doors, and began driving toward my office. Then my phone buzzed. One banking alert changed everything. I pulled my car onto the shoulder so hard that the tires squealed against the pavement. My hands trembled as I opened the banking app again, hoping I had misread the notification. I hadn't. $15,000 had been charged at one of the most exclusive jewelry boutiques on Fifth Avenue. I checked the timestamp. The purchase had been made only minutes earlier, at the exact moment David was supposedly boarding an international flight to Tokyo. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Then my training took over. Panic wouldn't help me. Evidence would. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. "My name is Eleanor," I said steadily after verifying my identity. "I'm the primary account holder. I need every card connected to this account frozen immediately, including every authorized user card." The representative didn't waste time. Within moments, all 6 platinum cards linked to our accounts were disabled. "If these charges are legitimate," the representative explained, "the cards can always be reactivated later." "No," I replied quietly. "If they're legitimate, I don't think I'll ever reactivate them." After ending the call, I dialed David's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. One more time. Still unavailable. His phone being off fit the story of someone on an international flight. But the jewelry purchase didn't. Neither did the uneasy expression he'd worn all through dinner. Neither did that mysterious phone call he'd taken on the balcony the night before, whispering so quietly that I couldn't hear a single word. Piece by piece, the image in my head became clearer. David wasn't flying to Tokyo. He had lied. The realization hit so hard it made my stomach twist. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes. 7 years of marriage replayed in my mind. Late nights working together. Weekend budgeting sessions. The sacrifices we'd both claimed to make. Every bonus we earned had gone into one shared dream, a beautiful townhouse where we planned to raise children someday. We had nearly $90,000 saved. Our future. Or at least, what I thought was our future. When I finally looked up, tears blurred the windshield. I wiped them away before they could fall. Crying could wait. Finding the truth couldn't. Instead of driving to work, I headed toward Midtown and parked outside a quiet coffee shop. I ordered the strongest black coffee they served and opened my banking history. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then I started paying attention to the details. Several luxury restaurant charges. Designer clothing stores. Boutiques I'd never visited. Expensive purchases spread across the previous several weeks. Each transaction was small enough to avoid suspicion. But together, they painted a devastating picture. Someone had been living an expensive double life. And I had unknowingly paid for it. A sharp pain settled deep inside my chest. How many lies had I missed? How many fake business dinners? Late meetings? Weekend conferences? Had actually been dates with another woman? The questions came faster than the answers. But one thing had already become clear. This wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a carefully planned betrayal. I reached for my phone again. There was only one person I trusted with something this serious. Paul. We had been friends since college, and over the years he'd built a successful career in cybersecurity. If anyone could uncover digital footprints, it was him. He answered before the second ring. "Ellie? Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "No." There was a brief silence. Then his voice became serious. "What happened?" "I think David lied about everything." Another pause. "What do you need?" "I need to know where he really is." Paul didn't ask unnecessary questions. "I'll start immediately," he said. "Send me everything you have, flight details, bank notifications, phone numbers, anything." "I will." "And Ellie." "Yeah?" "If your instincts are telling you something is wrong, they're usually right." I ended the call feeling strangely calmer. For the first time since receiving the bank notification, I wasn't completely alone. As evening approached, I finally returned home. The apartment no longer felt welcoming. It felt occupied. The television blasted through the living room. Empty snack bowls covered the coffee table. Richard was stretched across the sofa, snoring loudly with his shoes resting on the furniture. Teresa stood in front of the refrigerator, frowning as if searching for something to criticize. The moment she noticed me, she folded her arms. "You're finally home," she snapped. "We've been waiting for dinner." I checked the time. It wasn't even 8 o'clock. Normally I didn't leave work until after 7. "I just got back," I answered calmly. "There are groceries in the refrigerator. You could have made something." Teresa's expression hardened instantly. "So this is how it's going to be? David leaves for one day and suddenly his parents have to cook for themselves?" I looked at her quietly. Yesterday I would have apologized. Yesterday I would have rushed into the kitchen. Yesterday I still believed I had a husband worth protecting. Today was different. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrifying thought refused to disappear. What if David wasn't in Japan at all? What if, at that very moment, he was spending our life savings with the woman who had just received a $15,000 diamond gift? That question haunted me all night. While my in-laws slept peacefully in the next room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd had with David over the past several months. His late meetings. His sudden overtime. The weekends he claimed he had to entertain clients. Every excuse that once sounded reasonable now felt carefully rehearsed. By sunrise, I had stopped looking for explanations. I wanted proof. I arrived at my attorney Michael Sterling's office before 9 o'clock. He had represented me years earlier during a complicated real estate transaction, and I trusted both his judgment and his discretion. After greeting me, he immediately noticed the exhaustion on my face. "Eleanor, what happened?" Without saying a word, I placed printed bank statements on his desk. "I think my husband has been stealing our future." Michael adjusted his glasses and carefully reviewed every page. The room remained silent except for the turning of paper. Several long minutes passed before he finally looked up. "I'm afraid it's worse than you think." My heart sank. Our preliminary financial review uncovered a pattern of transfers stretching back nearly 6 months. He slid one document toward me. Every highlighted transaction carried a different amount. $1,000. $5,000. $3,000. $8,000. Each payment had been disguised as ordinary business expenses. But every transfer went to the same person. Isabella Vance. The name struck me immediately. I knew exactly who she was. 2 years earlier, David had introduced her at a company holiday party. She had been one of the newest interns, young, polite, and constantly praising him as the best mentor she'd ever met. I remembered smiling at her. I had even thanked her for helping David with projects. The irony made me feel sick. Michael continued. The combined amount transferred into her accounts totals approximately $90,000. $90,000. Our entire savings. Every dollar we'd spent years putting aside for our dream home had quietly disappeared. I gripped the armrest so tightly my fingers hurt. He planned this. Michael nodded. It appears so. He handed me another report. She's 24, officially unemployed, yet records show she recently acquired a luxury condominium in Miami. I let out a slow breath. So I paid for another woman's new life. Michael didn't interrupt. Sometimes silence speaks louder than sympathy. After a moment, I finally asked the question that mattered most. Can I get it back? He folded his hands. If we can prove those funds were marital assets transferred without your knowledge, yes. But we'll need more than bank records. What else? We need evidence showing David deliberately deceived you. That was exactly what I intended to find. Leaving Michael's office, I didn't drive home. Instead, I headed straight toward David's company. If there really was a 4-year assignment in Tokyo, someone there would confirm it. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Good morning, Eleanor. Are you looking for David? I forced a pleasant smile. Actually, I'd like to speak with Director Anna for a moment. A few minutes later, I found myself sitting across from David's department director. Anna welcomed me warmly. "What can I do for you?" I lowered my voice. David left for Tokyo so quickly that he forgot to give me the address of the office there. He needs prescription medication, and I can't reach his phone. I was hoping you could give me the company's contact information. Anna stared at me, completely confused. "I'm sorry." She blinked twice. "Tokyo?" "Yes. My husband said your company transferred him there yesterday." Silence filled the office. Then Anna slowly leaned back in her chair. "Eleanor, our company doesn't even have an office in Tokyo." The words echoed inside my head. She continued carefully. "Yesterday David submitted paperwork requesting 2 weeks of paid leave." I felt my pulse quicken. "What reason did he give?" Anna hesitated. Then answered quietly. "He wrote that his wife was seriously ill, and that he needed time off to care for her before taking her to Boston for specialized treatment." For a moment I couldn't speak. He hadn't just lied to me. He had used my health as part of the lie. He had turned me into a fictional patient so he could disappear with another woman. Anna immediately realized something was terribly wrong. "Eleanor." She walked around her desk and gently touched my shoulder. "Tell me the truth." The composure I'd fought so hard to maintain finally cracked. "I drove him to JFK yesterday." My voice trembled. "He told me he was leaving for Japan." I took out my phone and showed her the banking notification. This charge appeared minutes after I left the airport. Anna read it slowly. Her expression hardened. "I'm so sorry." She returned the phone. "Officially, I can confirm there is no overseas assignment." She paused. "And if David falsified company documents to obtain leave?" Her eyes narrowed. "Our Human Resources Department will begin an internal investigation immediately." For the first time in 2 days, I wasn't questioning my instincts anymore. Every suspicion had become undeniable fact. David hadn't simply betrayed our marriage. He had lied to his employer, manipulated his parents, drained our savings, and abandoned me to clean up the life he secretly destroyed. As I walked out of the glass office tower into the cool Manhattan air, my phone vibrated. It was Paul. His message contained only 7 words. "I found David. You're not going to believe this." My heart skipped a beat. I opened the attachment. The photograph loaded slowly. And when I finally saw it, every remaining illusion about my marriage died. I stopped walking. The noise of Manhattan traffic faded into the background as I stared at the photograph on my phone. There was David. Not in a business suit. Not carrying a laptop. Not standing outside a corporate office in Tokyo. He was wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt, sunglasses, and sandals. His arm was wrapped comfortably around Isabella. Behind them stretched a breathtaking ocean, swaying palm trees, and the entrance to one of Maui's most luxurious beachfront resorts. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the photo. It was the way they looked at each other. Relaxed. Happy. Completely free of guilt. Paul called before I could process what I was seeing. "Ellie?" "I saw it." "I'm sorry." "How did you get this?" "A colleague of mine was vacationing in Maui. He recognized David from pictures I'd shown him years ago. He snapped the photo yesterday morning." Yesterday morning. The exact morning David was supposed to be flying to Japan. Paul continued. "That's not all." A few seconds later another file arrived. It was a hotel reservation. 7 nights. Private oceanfront villa. $5,000 per night. The reservation was under David's full legal name. I slowly did the math. The villa alone cost $35,000. Add the first-class flights, luxury shopping, fine dining, jewelry. David had burned through nearly $50,000 while I was at home preparing meals for his parents and worrying about our future. My fingers tightened around the phone. I needed this, I whispered. For the divorce? For justice. Paul remained quiet before asking softly. What are you going to do now? I looked across the busy street. I'm going to make sure he can't spend another dollar. Within an hour I was sitting across from Michael Sterling again. This time I placed the Maui photographs, hotel reservation, and transaction records neatly across his desk. Michael studied every page carefully. When he finished, he gave a slow nod. This changes everything. He opened a legal folder. We now have strong evidence that David intentionally concealed marital assets while committing fraud against the marriage. Can we stop him? Yes. His answer came without hesitation. We'll file for divorce immediately. And his accounts? I'll request an emergency court order freezing every account connected to him. What about his investments? We'll freeze those too. The BMW? I'll file a lien so he can't sell it. A strange calm settled over me. Just 48 hours earlier I had been crying in my car. Now I felt something entirely different. Resolve. Michael slid the divorce petition toward me. Once you sign this, there's no turning back. I didn't hesitate. My signature flowed across the page with surprising confidence. For 7 years I had signed birthday cards, mortgage papers, vacation bookings. Always believing David and I were building one future together. This signature ended that illusion forever. Hours later we stood inside the courthouse. Because of the overwhelming financial evidence and the clear risk that David would continue hiding money, the judge approved the emergency request. Every major account connected to David was frozen. His credit cards, checking accounts, savings, investment portfolios. Even restrictions were placed against selling his luxury vehicle. Michael handed me a certified copy of the order. It's done. I stared at the official seal. David still believed he was enjoying a perfect Hawaiian vacation. He had no idea the financial ground beneath him had already disappeared. Driving home that evening felt different. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't overwhelmed by fear. I was prepared. The apartment door opened to complete chaos. Greasy takeout containers covered the coffee table. Beer cans littered the floor. Richard sat smoking inside despite the building's strict rules. Teresa barely looked up from her tablet. So, she said sarcastically. Her Highness finally decided to come home. I quietly placed my handbag on the chair. Walked over. Picked up Richard's cigarette. Crushed it into the ashtray. Then turned off the television. The room fell silent. Richard shot to his feet. What do you think you're doing? I met his eyes calmly. My house. My rules. Teresa laughed bitterly. Your house? This belongs to my son. Without raising my voice, I removed a folded document from my briefcase and laid it on the coffee table. This is formal notice. They exchanged confused looks. What notice? Teresa demanded. You have 3 days to move out. Her mouth fell open. Richard's face turned crimson. You've lost your mind. No. I finally found it. I looked directly at them. David never went to Tokyo. What nonsense are you talking about? Richard shouted. I unlocked my phone and placed the Maui photograph in front of him. There. That's your son. That's his mistress. And that's the vacation he paid for using our savings. Teresa grabbed the phone. Her hands trembled. For several seconds she simply stared. Then she thrust it back toward me. Fake. It's edited. My son would never betray his family. I sighed. Believe whatever helps you sleep. It doesn't change reality. I slowly picked up the court order. I've already filed for divorce. His financial accounts have been frozen. And in exactly 3 days. I looked from Teresa to Richard. You'll no longer be living here. The room exploded with shouting. Teresa burst into tears. Richard reached for his phone, desperately trying to call David. Again. And again. Every call went unanswered. They still didn't know why. But thousands of miles away in Maui, David was about to discover that every single one of his platinum credit cards had suddenly stopped working. David didn't realize anything was wrong until the waiter politely returned his platinum card. I'm sorry, sir. He tried another one. Declined. A third. Declined. His confident smile slowly disappeared. Across the table, Isabella laughed nervously. Maybe the bank flagged an international purchase. David forced a smile. Probably. But when all 6 of his cards failed one after another, panic began replacing confidence. The restaurant manager approached with professional courtesy. Sir, we'll need another form of payment. David stepped outside and immediately called the bank. After answering several security questions, the representative calmly delivered the news that shattered his fantasy. Due to a court order, all associated accounts have been frozen. He froze. What court order? I'm sorry, sir. We cannot provide additional information. The line went dead. For the first time since arriving in Hawaii, fear settled into his chest. He called me. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Then he tried Paul, his office, and even his parents. No answers explained why everything was collapsing around him. Back in New York, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about freedom. The next morning, the sheriff arrived with 2 NYPD officers and the building manager. Richard and Teresa had ignored my deadline. Instead, they had changed the locks from inside. The sheriff knocked firmly. This is your final notice. Richard shouted through the door. We're not leaving. The building manager looked at me. I simply nodded. Minutes later, a locksmith drilled out the lock while everything was recorded on body cameras. When the door finally opened, my in-laws stood frozen inside the living room. The confidence they had displayed for days disappeared instantly. The movers packed only their personal belongings. Everything else remained exactly where it belonged. Teresa cried continuously. Richard muttered insults under his breath. I didn't respond. Anger no longer controlled me. Peace did. Before they left, I handed Richard an envelope. Inside was enough cash for food and a receipt for 1 week at a modest motel. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave 2 elderly people sleeping on the street. This is the last help you'll ever receive from me, I said quietly. Richard stared at me in silence. For once, he had no argument. When the apartment door finally closed behind them, I stood alone in complete silence. No shouting. No criticism. No manipulation. Just peace. I walked from room to room, opened every window, and let the fresh Manhattan air fill the condo. For the first time in years, it actually felt like home. Meanwhile, David's nightmare had only begun. Without working credit cards, he was forced to leave the luxury resort. Isabella stayed exactly 1 more day. When she realized the money was gone, so was she. She packed her designer luggage, ordered a ride to the airport, and disappeared without saying goodbye. The woman David had sacrificed everything for didn't stay when there was nothing left to spend. Desperate for cash, he sold his expensive Rolex to a pawn shop for a tiny fraction of what he'd paid. It was just enough to buy an economy ticket back to New York. Gone were the first-class seats and luxury lounges. He spent the entire flight squeezed into the last rows of the airplane, wondering how his perfect plan had collapsed so quickly. When he landed, reality hit even harder. His parents were living in a cheap motel. His marriage was over. His bank accounts were frozen. And before 24 hours had passed, his company terminated his employment after discovering he had lied about the fake Tokyo assignment. The internal audit uncovered financial misconduct that stretched back months. Instead of receiving the promotion he had invented, he was facing lawsuits and possible criminal charges. Every lie he told had finally caught up with him. Several weeks later, Isabella unexpectedly contacted me. She looked exhausted. The confidence I had seen in the Maui photographs had vanished. She placed an envelope on the table. There are $12,000 inside. It isn't everything, but it's all I have left. She admitted David had lied to her as well. He promised they would marry. He claimed our marriage had already ended. Listening to her, I realized something important. She had made selfish choices. But she had also believed a master manipulator. I accepted the money. Learn from this, I told her. A relationship built on betrayal never becomes a happy ending. She cried quietly as I walked away. Months later, David waited outside my office. He looked older. Thinner. Broken. The expensive suits were gone. So was the confidence. The moment he saw me, he dropped to his knees. Eleanor, please. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I still love you. Please give me another chance. People walking past slowed down to watch. I looked at him calmly. The day you chose another woman, you also chose this future. He reached toward me. I'm going to lose everything. I stepped back. You already did. Then I walked away without looking back. That chapter of my life had ended. The divorce was finalized without surprises. The court awarded me the apartment and ordered David to repay the marital assets he had wrongfully transferred. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It arrived quietly through documents, evidence, and truth. 2 years later, I accepted an executive position with a technology company in San Francisco. I sold the New York condo, invested wisely, and built a life that no longer depended on anyone else's promises. One evening, while enjoying dinner overlooking the bay, my phone buzzed. It was Paul. He had sent a photograph. David was driving for a rideshare company in an aging sedan. His face looked tired. His hair had begun turning gray. Paul wrote only one sentence. He never recovered. I looked at the picture for a moment before locking my phone. Across the table, Andrew smiled as he raised his glass. To new beginnings. I smiled back and gently clinked my glass against his. To honesty, I replied. Because losing a dishonest husband wasn't the greatest tragedy of my life. Believing his lies had been. Walking away from them was the moment I finally became free.